The right to education has been entrenched in international law since the founding of the United Nations. The right to education is part of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but it's only in the last 35 years that there's been increased recognition of the right to an inclusive education, meaning that all learners, including those with disabilities, would be included in education. And specifically with Article 24 of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, there's a very explicit right to inclusive education. So for all countries that have ratified the convention, that means that inclusion is the law. And what's meant by inclusion in the convention and in the general comment that was issued by the committee responsible for interpreting the convention is that learners with disabilities have the right to be in regular school systems with their non-disabled peers throughout their school careers, and that all school systems must be fully inclusive. A really important element is that those systems have to be inclusive of all students, but make sure that they make provisions for learners who have a disability through reasonable accommodation and also through offering whatever particular supports a learner with disabilities might have. The general comment goes beyond the general statements of the convention in making a distinction between exclusion, when those with disabilities were completely left out of education systems, in segregation, when some education was provided, but in separate settings, often separate schools, sometimes separate classes. And that's still, unfortunately, what exists for many people with disabilities up until today. The third possibility is integration. And that's been something that's been going on for the last number of years, where if students could make it, if they could survive in the system the way it existed, they would be welcomed into the class. But if they couldn't adapt on their own, they were not able to stay. Inclusion is different, because what inclusion means is that the system itself has to change. The system has to change so that all learners can benefit from it. And that means that teachers need support. They need a different kind of training. In the past, some teachers were prepared to teach students that didn't have any particular learning needs, and others were prepared to teach those who had particular learning needs. The concept of inclusion means that all teachers need to be prepared to teach all students. And that means changing learning styles. It means changing teaching styles, rather, changing the way a classroom is organized so that there's more cooperation between students and more opportunity for students to learn from each other. So what this means is a move away from exclusion, which still happens too often, a move away from segregation, which means being educated apart, a move away from integration, which means you're welcome if you can make it on your own, but if you can't adapt, you're not welcome, to inclusion, which means transforming education systems so that everybody can benefit. And the advantage is an advantage not only for learners with disabilities, but a fully inclusive system really benefits all.